I think this is the most nervous I've ever felt because I've never read or watched or have seen anything about Berserk, but I know that it's grim, and that has me a little bit worried here. I don't know how well I can really talk about a dark subject matter, and from what I've heard about Berserk, I think it is meant to be pretty dark. But I think it is also one of those stories that I think you have to experience. It just has so much history and culture, and it's referenced in so many things. I hear it referenced in Fear and Hunger. I hear it referenced in Dark Souls. At this point, it feels like I am missing out on a lot of substance and nuance from other pieces of media by not reading Berserk. So we're going to go through a bit of Berserk. We're going to see how it is, and then I'll decide if I ever pick it back up. Sounds good? Good. All right. Yeah. So I don't know how we're going to review this one. I literally flipped to the first page of Berserk, and yeah, I don't think I can show that on YouTube. So Berserk is like a grim fantasy story. From the first chapter, we're shown of monsters that lure you into vulnerable situations. This one eats you. I think it has the line, "It's fitting that you should fall to hell while you get a taste of heaven," which I think is like the funniest and like strongest Shakespeare quote that you can dish out. So Berserk seems to be a world in which vulnerability leads to trouble, which is why I think Guts doesn't help anyone at the beginning. He doesn't help the man who's begging or has lost a few limbs, or the imprisoned people who get sent out of the castle, or even like the fairy when he's taking out the gang of people that are trying to kill the said fairy. He walks into a tavern, sees that the fairy is trapped, kills all the people who are trapping the fairy, and then leaves. And the fairy says, "Aren't you gonna save me?" And nope, that's gonna be more trouble than it's worth. And as we find out, it ends up being more trouble than it's worth. The actual design of Guts is fascinating. He carries a brick of a sword. It's like the one iconic thing about the guy. And I didn't know he had a robot minigun arm. It's pretty cool. And I think there is something interesting about Guts. His like willingness to at times shoot himself in the foot. He does things that he knows will get him into more trouble. He attacks a group more or less knowing that something bad will come of it. And when something does come of it, he accepts it and even taunts it, knowing that there will be bad consequences to come of it. What's also interesting is how emotionally unstable he is towards physical contact. Not when he's being tortured, he's like in pain but doesn't talk. I mean when the fairy tries to sit on his shoulder and talk to him or check his wounds to see how bad the damage is. That is when he freaks out, very abruptly. It doesn't happen around times of distress or violence really. That's when he seems to dissociate. He instead freaks out around times of intimacy or genuine care. After getting tortured for a bit, we're introduced to the mayor and it kind of peels back the layers to this world. Berserk is a world full of corruption where monsters rule the world, literally. I don't know, it's pretty on the nose with that one. The fairy, who says they're an elf, I know, but I'm gonna call them a fairy because they look like a fairy. The fairy is kinda the straight man in this duo. It can heal Guts and sense his emotions, and it's through showing itself as useful to Guts that I think Guts is able to open up to the fairy, at least for a little bit. It's like Guts was willing to share a few words and become vulnerable because he was safe, even if he didn't realize it. I think the fairy is a good addition that helps read more into Guts because he can be kind of like an edgy brick wall sometimes. The fairy can literally bypass that by sensing his emotions, and wow, there's a lot of them, most of which Guts doesn't want to share. It makes him like a puzzle, harder to read that way. When the fairy says, like, "Why did you save me if you didn't care about me?" you can feel Guts working through the logistics of that answer. He calls the fairy a pathetic insect, which I think is like a defense mechanism to ward off their kindness. Like Guts realized he did something nice and then tries to immediately deny himself that empathy. And when he insults the fairy and the fairy starts crying, it stuns him. He was able to deflect kindness and realize that he unintentionally caused harm. And that's another thing. I don't think Guts is lashing out. I think he's just damaged. I think he's used to people lashing out at him. Maybe he'd say something back and then there would be like an argument. But I don't think Guts expected someone to genuinely attach themselves to Guts enough to cry like the fairy did. I don't think Guts is used to that reaction or knows how to respond to it. The rest of the chapter kind of confirms this to me. The world of Berserk is messed up. You see people dying left and right. The villain in this chapter is a actual monster, and he's met with torture, not even like a merciful death. This to me seems like Guts in his element, when he's not thinking of anyone or anything and he's just causing damage and not needing to be sympathetic. Some final notes for this chapter is that we mentioned the Godhands, which I think is like a cult of people that's going to maybe tie into the rest of the arc or the series as we continue. And we also learned that Guts is branded with the sacrificial seal, which is what I think is actually making him go, berserk. In the second chapter, Guts tells Puck, "I don't like elves because they're weak, and weak creatures hold on to the strong," which I think is projecting. But I also think this affected Guts in one point in time. Either he was weak at one point and he hates seeing that in others because he knows the consequences of weakness, or he had to protect someone weak and failed to do so, and now he doesn't ever want to try to look at someone weaker because he's afraid of it happening again. It's something that continuously happens to him. He's walking in the rain, an old guy says he'll help him out. Guts is hesitant to do so, but eventually says, "Why not? It's not like it's my concern what happens to other people," despite clearly caring about what happens to other people. And then we see what happens to other people. Spirits come out of nowhere, they end up killing the innocent travel goers, and then control the travel goers to attack Guts. Which, by the way, that's some bad luck. That's gotta be brutal. But I can totally see this further rationalizing Guts' internal thought process. Because people trust me, and I got people killed, because weaker people clung onto me, and they ended up dead, and I ended up hurt. You can see how this could spiral out of control for him really easily. So then when you see Guts saying something like, "The weak must suffer what they must," you can see his guilt trying to block things out. He's coping. In that sense, I like Puck for their ability to pick up on what Guts is feeling. Puck feels like, well, I don't want to say Puck is therapy, but Puck is at least emotionally stable enough and has a moral compass enough to be the straight man to Guts' unhinged behavior and negative thought patterns. So many characters in this arc have so many parallels to Guts. There is a character that we run into who has lost so many limbs and people he's cared about, and he wants to enact revenge, and so he begs Guts to help him because he is too weak to do it himself. And I feel like Guts hates seeing himself in someone like that. When Guts refuses and that guy tries to enact revenge by himself and it doesn't work, you can sense the range of emotions coming from Guts. He is angry and upset and conflicted and kind of scared and worried, all of which are like boiling inside of Guts. I think Guts would be okay with helping that disfigured man, but something about him psychologically just doesn't allow himself to admit it, because he eventually does help him. Guts eventually goes out and finds this king who has become a monster, and he fights him, which brings us to the kind of polar opposite character, which is this powerful king who has, by all means, stripped away his humanity. And I don't know, that kind of has parallels to Guts. A character who's very emotionally hurt, stripping away his humanity for violence. On the other hand, even the king, who is like this monster creature, isn't fully a monster creature. He's like a human to some degree. He has a daughter who he cares for, and he wants to get close to her despite everything he's doing sickening her. And one of the few reasons why he's able to beat the monster, the king, is because he gets distracted by seeing his daughter. It's not the monstrous side that makes him lose. It is like that sympathy and that like human side that makes him vulnerable enough to die, which is kind of what we talked about in the beginning. Being vulnerable in this world leads to a lot of death. That's when Guts kind of has the upper hand to kill him and then tortures him in front of his own daughter. And that can't be like healthy psychologically for her. It is in this situation in which we get like the weirdest thing here. Upon killing the corrupt king, a portion of his blood spills on an egg, this like ancient artifact that is also a key, and awakens the egg. It gives him full third eye and all, opening up a weird staircase-like environment that encompasses everyone in it. We have now gone into Eldritch Horror, because what is going on here? I don't know if Guts has to be cruel to the king in order for him to kill him, or if he's just forced to do this by the curse, or if he just wants to torture the king demon thing. And I don't know if he has to be cruel to the king to awaken that egg thing, or if it just needs like a little bit of blood on him, right? There's like a lot of questions here, but conceptually, it's fascinating. Inside this new environment, we get Bird Guy. I feel like I've seen that armor before, but I don't think I've ever seen whoever he hangs out with. They look kind of forgettable. Someone might get mad at me for that one. They might be like, no, they're peak, trust. These are cool characters. But to me, we just got Brain Guy, Bird Guy, and Lady put some clothes on. So I think they're like the main bad guys who the rest of the baddies worship. They also don't seem to care about Guts that much at all. Guts seems to care. He's like, oh, you took everything from me. We learn that humans can ascend to Godhand status if fate chooses him, implying that there's like a greater being at work. So there's like a god, and then there's like Godhand, which is like the Bird Guy and co. And then there's like the demons below them. The Godhands mention that a sacrifice requires someone you care about and the evilness will possess your mind. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that it's not subtle. They're like, yeah, we're the bad guys. It's not like, oh, you'll be corrupted with power or greed. It's just like, nope, you're going to be evil. And so you kind of start to think like, why would anyone take this offer? And that's when you learn the king and his daughter's backstory, which is that like at the time, the king was trying to get rid of like Satan devil worshippers. And then he found out that like one of them was his own wife because he found her in a cult making love to a satanic statue. And like, that's gotta be rough, bro. You got cheated on by like a goat man statue. Which brings us back to the egg, because I don't think it is the physical pain that brings you to a different dimension. I think it's the deepest desires, your like own pain and sorrow, that literally opens a portal to hell. And the king used it at first to detach himself from sorrow, and then that detachment breeds cruelty. When they say that evilness will possess your mind, it's not like an inherent pure haha evil, even though it kind of looks that way. And to a degree, I think it is. You literally become like a baby eater. But I think the evilness, the cruelty, comes from detaching yourself from others. It is because you separated yourself from sorrow and pain and instead just focused in on your deepest desire. Bird Guy seemed to have wanted to detach himself from fate, and he became a Godhand too. There's like arrogance or ignorance or selfishness that comes with accepting the steal. Also, I think the world of Berserk like actually depicts hell. Like I think this is just hell. There's a spiral of corpses that suck you up into hell, and you see a lot of faces in there. Anyone who is also branded will get sucked up into this hell. And the girl does not like that outcome. I don't know why when person A takes the steal, it also seems to affect person B. Like they need to have someone who they are attached to in order to detach themselves from that person. I think that in detaching yourself from someone and marking them with a seal, you are kind of stating that you are now fixated on your own goal and you do not care what happens to this other person. And so who cares how you were with them before? Now they can die for all you care. In the end, Guts and the girl and Puck are the only ones who are alive. Her father was a demon who died and went to hell. And I think corruption and evil is no longer in that kingdom. Guts ends up saving her, and she in turn hates Guts for what he did. I mean, fair. A lot of it was kind of brutal. But also, your father can't kill you. All the demons are gone. You're still alive. And you're not branded with a curse. Honestly, take it as a win. Don't be a crybaby. That was the Black Swordsman arc. I found the first arc of Berserk fascinating and kind of depressing. Before we wrap it up, I just want to talk about the art of Berserk. So many panels are gorgeous. Like, of course, you got the art on one side, but also like the composition and framing on the other. Some of my favorite panels have been the ones that turn Lovecraftian and otherworldly. Like, those are really beautifully drawn. Also, I know the world of Berserk has like a lot of nudity and sex, but I also really find it interesting how there's a lot of panels that are very intimate and sensual. We talked about vulnerability being a theme in the story, so we'll probably see more of this. I didn't know where to include that. I just found that interesting. Anyways, thanks to all the patrons who are out there fighting demons, a lot of them physical, some of them emotional. I'm looking around to see what else I can review. If I keep reading enough Berserk, maybe I'll make a follow-up to this. Who knows?